Hi, welcome. This is your Professor Joseph. We are at Chapter 17 today, and we're going to be discussing Rene Descartes. Now, for some of you, you might look at that name and think Descartes, but it's Descartes. Yes, and, as always, Chapter 17, these are the pages you have to read, about 44, and they're detailed. And by the time you get to my video, I'll already have assumed that you've read or done the reading for this chapter. And I'm just giving you a few highlights that I think are important. If you wanted to watch this video, this is really nice too. And last but not least, this is a paper that I wrote back in 2013. One of my first classes in my PhD program at Claremont Graduate University. Patricia Easton, she taught this. She's now the provost of the university. She's really, really up there. Anyway, she was a Descartes scholar. That's all. That's what her specialty was. So I did an article, or I did a paper for a class. Got it published as an article where I used Descartes' metaphysics, and we'll discover that in this little mini lecture here. And I mapped that onto near-death experiences, and I try to find out, does that work? It was just a class paper, but it was really fun. So let's do this. Back up. And let's go to our main text here. So chapter 17, doubting our way to certainty. So Descartes, 1596 through 1650. Let me read a few things and I'll kind of dive in. But first of all, let me just remind you what he contributed. You remember in my first lecture on chapter 16, I broke down categories: critical thinking, metaphysics, epistemology, ethics, aesthetics, and human nature. And I said these are like main branches of philosophy. Well, Descartes contributed, and I told you certain philosophers have contributed to these branches and different ideas within them. Descartes, in this reading, he's contributed to logic, critical thinking, metaphysics, and epistemology, just huge, huge areas. Inside of metaphysics, specifically, he contributes to philosophy of religion. Inside this reading, he's going to make a few arguments for the existence of God. You should look those over. I'll kind of walk you through a couple of them, especially if you have never taken a logic class or a critical thinking class, but especially logic, because that really is about arguments and the analysis of arguments. And I'll show you kind of what he does. And then the epistemology, dealing with knowledge. We could think of knowledge as justified true belief. That might be a standard definition from the ancient times that's been debated over, but justified true belief. So if I have knowledge or an instance of knowledge, meaning, I'll give you an example. Like right now as I record, I'm recording this lecture in my house. I have justified true belief where I have knowledge of my car being parked in the parking lot if three things are true. If it's true that my car is, I have knowledge of my car being out in the parking lot if three things are true. Can't use that, it's one of their criteria. Sorry, let me start all over. I have knowledge of my car being parked in the parking lot if three things obtain. One, it has to be true that my car is in the parking lot. Two, I have to believe it. I have to be ready to act as if it's true in reality. And three, I have to be justified. I have to have reasons or some support for believing that my car is in the parking lot. Now, I have knowledge if I've seen the car parked in my parking lot. That way I have evidence of it. I know it's true. I believe it. Boom, I have knowledge. So Descartes, his massive contribution in this chapter, he's going to start by doubting everything so that he can possibly arrive at one instance of knowledge. You might say, why is he doing that? But we'll get to that. So anyways, these are the branches he contributes to. But one thing to know about Descartes, he was also a scientist, very, very smart. Let me just tell you what he invented. He was, you might want to say he's the modern father of geometry. But anyways, he invented the Cartesian grid. Look at that. We've all used it, right, in geometry. He invented that. So that's one of the many things he's done. So he's huge into science as well as being an awesome philosopher. But let's go back. One thing the chapter doesn't emphasize is rationalism. Before I start getting into the weeds of Descartes, you might say, what's rationalism? Because we're going to find out that's going to be compared to empiricism later on when we see that Hume and Locke are empiricists. But let's go read you a brief definition. Rationalism: a belief or theory that opinions and actions should be based on reason and knowledge rather than religious belief, science, or emotional response. So a rationalist, you might say, in philosophy, let me do this. Yeah, this is good. Oh, and let me continue. The theory that reason rather than experience is the foundation of certainty in knowledge. So what does he mean by this? Let me do a little unpacking. We have 5 senses, right? We can do touch, sound, sight, taste. There's another one I'm forgetting, but there's 5, right? And these are senses that we navigate through reality with. And you might say those can deceive us sometimes. So Descartes will try to bypass those senses and get into what philosophers call a 6th sense. And that would be the rational sense, which we use purely, we arrive at knowledge purely by reason and reason alone. So we'll find out that in later chapters, there's going to be philosophers like Hume and Locke that totally argue against, and even Berkeley, they'll argue against Descartes' rationalism. So you might say there's a movement that Rene Descartes starts, but let me go back. Reading. Okay. Yeah, he's credited as being the father of modern philosophy. You might say that's why we're starting with his chapter. But let me do this. Just a brief background. He was not an atheist. He was a Christian. He actually believed God exists. And more specifically, he believed Jesus was God. That's just what he believed. He was a member of the Catholic Church. And in fact, it says he was a Jesuit. So we'll read other philosophers, for this semester that were believers in God. And then we'll also read others that were actual atheists. So, they'll have different religious beliefs. Now, he doesn't believe in God willy-nilly. He actually has arguments for the existence of God. And that's specific because that leads into a metaphysical part of this reading that deals with the philosophy of religion. In philosophy of religion, we deal with God. Well, what is God? Does God exist? What's evil? All kinds of things come out of this. And this is where we get the debates between theists and atheists and agnostics. But again, remember I told you in the first lecture, it's not enough just to believe something. In philosophy, we're after, but why do you believe it? What kind of reasons do you have for your beliefs? And Rene Descartes will definitely be giving us reasons, solid ones for his beliefs. So if you believed in God and you were reading this chapter right now, you might say, well, you could use part of Descartes or all of Descartes for giving a rational defense for why you believe in God, because you could say, look, I don't know, I like Descartes' arguments. If you're an atheist, you might say, oh, those arguments don't work. If you're an agnostic, you might say, well, if I believed in God, maybe I could use Descartes. And if I don't believe in God, maybe I don't. So you might say his philosophy is consistent with believing in God and gives you a rational account of doing so. So you could borrow from that if you wanted to. Okay, so I'll just read a little bit from your reading on page 361. This is why his discovery of analytic geometry excites him. Imagine this, his discovery. I mean, he's also the father of analytic geometry. Again, he invented the Cartesian grid. And by the way, whenever you hear the word Cartesian, it's referring to Descartes. They are synonymous. I used to know why. I kind of forget why. Cartesian versus Descartes, but definitely is all about him. When you hear those two words, they're interchangeable. Okay. So since the natural world can be geometrically represented in terms of size, figure, volume, spatial relations, and natural things, analytic geometry promises an algebraic treatment of all of nature. Descartes realizes he has found a new way to read the great book of the world. So you might say, in this sense, he was a scientist. He was looking for knowledge, and he's going to get there by using a metaphysical analysis of reality. Then he'll prove to us that he can have instances of knowledge. And this is what the meditations are all about, 1 through 6. This is what he's doing. Just sitting down and getting in a yoga position and saying, and like meditating and then not coming out with anything. He's meditating and he's asking very deep questions about reality, and he's going to come out with arguments and answers. So he's going to do more than just sit there and close his eyes and meditate on nothing. And I'm not making fun of meditation. What I'm saying is his type of meditation is very focused on a few things. So let's see. I won't read that part. One thing to note, if you haven't taken ancient philosophy, Descartes agrees with Plato's metaphysics of reality versus Aristotle's. He'll actually attack Aristotle. Now, that's not the sole purpose of this chapter, but you might say other philosophers will pick up Aristotle's metaphysics and ride with that. So, for example, Aquinas loves Aristotle, uses him all the time in his metaphysics, and Aquinas is also a Christian philosopher, very famous one that we don't cover in this semester. Descartes attacks Aristotle's metaphysics, saying it doesn't work, it doesn't represent reality as best as it could. I'm going to use Plato's metaphysics. So you'll go back and you'll start to realize Aristotle and Plato disagreed on a few things. So did Aquinas and Descartes. Does that mean that God doesn't exist because they disagreed? No, not at all. Just means that they thought that they had a better way of doing metaphysics and epistemology. So again, reviewing, epistemology deals with knowledge and skepticism, justified true belief. Metaphysics deals with reality, things that exist, what does exist, what is something. Completely different branches inside philosophy. Descartes' going to contribute to both. So, yes, I will do this. I will do this. Let's go to, and you can find this in your essentials right here. Go back out to your modules. Essentials from reading. So if you clicked on this right here, and then you open that document, you will be where I'm looking at. And I give these to you because this gives you kind of bullet points for the main things that Descartes will do, or anybody else in their readings. So right here, he discovered analytic geometry. We already did that. I'll get down to the meditations. Their purpose: to establish once and for all a foundation for knowing the external world through proving the existence and the nature of God and the soul. So meditation 1, he's going to deal with skepticism and start there. He's going to talk about sensory illusions, dreams, and demon deceivers. He's going to wipe the slate clean. Meditation 2, he establishes what we call the cogito. And this is, if you want the ultra mega bottom line of this entire chapter, he establishes something called I think, therefore I am. So the cogito is in Latin, and that's what it stands for. I think, therefore I am. He's going to establish that he's a thinking thing. But we'll unpack that a little bit more. Meditation 3, he's going to give us a criterion to use. When you know things clearly and distinctly, when you know one idea from another. And you can read these if you want. Meditation 4, how to avoid error. 5, he's going to give you proofs for the existence of God. He'll give you 2 proofs for the existence of God inside meditation 3. He'll give you another one inside meditation 5. So what, in your reading for chapter 17, you'll realize he's given you 3 or 4 proofs for the existence of God. He'll kind of scatter them through his meditations. So you can look at those if you want. For meditation 6, why material things could exist. And that has a lot to do with God not deceiving you. So once he gets an argument for the existence of God on the table, he's going to say, all right, once we have a good God and he has these qualities that aren't evil, he's not deceiving you. So God will create you with, neural gear, your brain systems and all that kind of stuff, and you have consciousness. And that'll be consistent with when you see things in reality outside of being deceived by your normal, everyday senses with your empirical senses. Like, I'll give you an example. So you could stick a straw in water and it looks like the straw bends and it gets all funky. Descartes' going to say, yeah, of course, like your senses are deceiving you. But if you pull the straw, you realize, oh, okay, the straw is not bent. So there's light and refraction going on. He's going to say outside of that, you're not being deceived. If you see the sunlight, you walk outside of your house and you see birds chirping, you're not looking at monkeys chirping, you're looking at birds chirping. So he's going to say, reality that you perceive is not radically different from what you perceive. God is going to keep things consistent. So that's kind of what he's doing with these meditations. And the only way you cannot be deceived, for sure, the only way that you can actually have knowledge is if God exists. So this is going to be another deeper claim. If God does not exist for Descartes, you can't actually know anything for sure. So this is something that might not stand out in the chapter, and I'm going to make it stand out for you. That's what his contribution is doing. He's going to say, look, epistemology overall, since Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato from the ancient times, they're getting at this justified true belief. Like that example I was giving you in the parking lot with my car being there. I have an instance of knowledge if I have justified true belief. Descartes' going to ultimately say, you can't even know your car is in the parking lot unless God exists, because technically you could be deceived about every possible thing that you think you perceive unless God exists. Now he does that by something called the evil genius, and then he starts out by using dreams, but we'll get into that. So yeah, so anyways, those are some of the highlights. Let's go back to your reading. Boom. And I wanted to first start off with, let me see here. Yeah, this is a really good highlight. This is something to take into consideration. So when we start thinking about reality, where do you start? Do you start with metaphysics? Do you start with epistemology? Do you start with ethics? Do you start with logic? Do you start with aesthetics? Your very consciousness? Like, where do you start when you're thinking, like, what can I know about reality? So Descartes will call this first philosophy. And this term's derived from Aristotle, who means by when you search for first principles of things. First philosophy is also called metaphysics. So this is where Descartes is going to start. Descartes uses a memorable image, and this is going to be, a picture's worth 1,000 words. This is really going to help you understand what he's doing. Thus, the whole of philosophy is like a tree. The roots are metaphysics, the trunk is physics, and the branches from the tree are called sciences. So he's going to say, when we look at reality, when we see, the physical world, this is what we're looking at, the sciences, the physics below them, right? Underneath that is metaphysics. This is what Descartes is going to start with. What's metaphysics? When Aristotle started physics way back in the ancient world, he also had a book called Metaphysics, and it's basically above or beyond. Meta means above or beyond something. That's kind of the technical. But Aristotle used it simply after physics. So it was like the next book after physics. But it turns out that was, pretty deep. And he was talking about deeper things above or beyond reality. So you might say categories of reality. And we get into things like cause, existence, substance, things like that. Well, that's where Descartes' at. He's going to say, look, even beyond the physical world, there's something beneath it. So he's going to say it's even more fundamental. It's more significant than physics or sciences. And you might say, for him, what that's going to look like is things that are immaterial. They're not physical. They're things that you can't see with your own eyes. Hence, remember rationalism, that sixth sense, the things that we can know by reason alone? This is where he's going to take us in metaphysics. And I know some of you are thinking, what in the world is he talking about? Like Joseph and Descartes. I'm lost, right? No problem. This is what I'm helping you. I'm coaching you through this. So metaphysics is above or beyond reality. It's deeper in the philosophical sense. And I'll get to that in a second. But right here is a synopsis. Like, so meditation 1 through 6, boom, these are the bottom lines of the entire meditation. But again, you should read these. You should do the whole chapter reading, because in the details, when you're reading Descartes, he's very fascinating how he makes an argument. It's not just enough to know, hey, meditation's about can anything be known? Look, in this day and age, a lot of people just want a bottom line. And I'm going to tell you, especially in a philosophy class, the bottom line doesn't mean anything. You have to figure out, how did they get there? What does it mean when he asks this question? What kind of evidence and insights does he give you? That's where the deep journey of philosophy is. It's taking a ride with Descartes and letting him walk you through his argument and why it's important. And he's going to give you multiple reasons, one after another. So yeah, meditation 1, he's going to start with, can anything be known? So what he's going to do, it's often, he's often cited as using hyperbole, meaning above and beyond, being very excessive. He's going to doubt every single thing on purpose. He's going to say, look, there's been debates since the ancient times till now, can we know anything? And there's skepticism. And we got a hint of Montaigne's skepticism in chapter 16, but this goes way back to the ancient world. And he's going to say, okay, let's play along. Let's say we could be skeptical that we could know anything. Descartes' going to say, let's just doubt everything. Let's doubt every possible thing that you think you could know about anything, and then start with one thing. Could you know anything for sure? Anything at all? And that you might say is the massive contribution that Descartes gives you in this chapter. That's what he's doing. He's trying to say, look, you can know something for sure, and it's this, that you're a thinking thing. You, ladies and gentlemen, are not a physical thing. You are a thinking thing, something that's not physical. And that's some of you might say that's where the argument where we get the existence of the soul. And you might say the soul is like a theological term. Well, Descartes is going to give you a philosophical argument for the soul here. He's going to say the soul is a thinking thing. Or you might say it's a substance capable of a rational nature. But even more specifically, the soul is an immaterial substance capable of a rational nature. Now I'm getting metaphysical on you. Immaterial means you can't knock on a piece of wood and say, oh yeah, it exists, I'm touching it. No. It's immaterial. It can't be touched. And it's a substance, meaning it has some sort of property. What kind of property does it have? A rational property. It's a thinking thing. So that's metaphysical for Descartes. And he's going to say, yeah, you can know this. And he walks you through how you could know this, that you're a thinking thing, by these meditations. So he gives you this in second meditation, that I exist. I am a thinking thing. And in doing this, he has to resist doubting. And he starts by giving examples of dreams and an evil demon. So with dreams, he says, look, when you're dreaming and you're in a dream world, how do you know that you're dreaming? You actually don't until you wake up. And so when you're in that dream, it's hard to know that the other world exists. So you could be skeptical of the real world while you're in your dream, right? And then when you're awake, you realize, oh, the dream is just a dream. That's not real. But you have that privilege of saying that because you're awake. So it's kind of fascinating. Think about all the wonderful dreams you've had, and inside the dream world, you don't know you're dreaming. We can get into this further by talking about lucid dreaming, and then, how you can control your dreams and find out that you're not dreaming. And you can watch that movie Inception. Oh, it's awesome. Awesome movie. But outside of that, for normal day people, when you're dreaming, you don't know you're dreaming. And then he's going to say, but it gets even bigger than that. How about hypothetically, let's think of a thought experiment. And, you can do your reading on this in the chapter and you'll find out where he does this. But he says, what if there's an evil demon that exists and this evil demon could be deceiving you about every possible thing in reality since you're a baby all the way up until now, everything, including you listening to this lecture of Joseph, your professor. It's possible that an evil demon's deceiving you even on that. For all you know, you're watching a cartoon, but the evil demon's like, no, you're actually listening to this lecture from Joseph. Or let's say when you go outside and you see the color red, you're actually seeing green because the evil demon's deceiving you about everything you see, right? So Descartes' going to say, the only way to get past this evil demon is for the existence of God. Because the demon's evil, he'll deceive you. That's what he does, right? But if God exists, and we could say that God has great making qualities of goodness, you might say, if a good God exists and creates you, you won't be deceived. So that's what Descartes' doing when he doubts everything. He's trying to say, could we not doubt something? And he's going to say, there's one thing that you cannot doubt, and it's this, that you're actually doing thinking. For example, let's say that an evil demon's deceiving us right now. You think you're looking at a color blue, right? But it's red. Descartes could say, it's possible that the demon's deceiving you, but one thing's not possible, and it's this. You're actually thinking while you're being deceived. And Descartes would say, you can't be deceived that you're actually thinking, because that's the very nature of you as a thing, is to think. And he's going to say, because the demon can't deceive you that you're actually thinking, whether you're doing bad thinking or good thinking, you're actually thinking. And he's going to say, bingo, this is the first instance of knowledge that we actually can arrive at. And it's called, I'm a thinking thing, or it's called a cogito. So when you do your reading, he's going to walk you through and show you this. And he's going to do it with massive doubt. He's going to try to doubt everything. He's going to say, can we doubt that we're actually thinking? He's going to say, no, it's impossible to doubt that we're actually thinking. So he's going to use the proofs for the existence of God. He's going to argue for with that we're thinking, or he's going to say we're a thinking thing in meditation 2, and then he's going to say, if I'm a thinking thing, that means I exist. Dude, I exist. And you might say that's the first instance of knowledge that he arrives at. He's a thinking thing, therefore he exists. I think, therefore I am. So when he says I am, he's saying I exist. He's going to say, I have an instance of knowledge, meaning in epistemology, I have it. This is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, you might say. This is what philosophers are after. This is knowledge, right? And he's going to say, if I have that foundational starting point, then I can add on to it and say, okay, there's other things I can also know. So that's the starting point for him. So then he says, okay, once I know I exist, then I'm a thinking thing. Now how do I get past deception? Well, then he goes into, if I can make an argument for the existence of God, then I can get, other instances of knowledge where I'm not deceived. And then on and on and on. And then he can finally say, in meditation 6, that I'm a thinking thing and I'm not a physical thing, meaning as a human person, I'm not my body, but I have my body. Or I'm not my brain, I'm not reducible to my brain, but I have my brain. In other words, I can exist without my brain or body because I'm a thinking thing. And we can call that the soul. So, yeah, that's a lot going on in these meditations. I'm just giving you the tip of the iceberg. But these are the main points, right? He's going to walk you through these. And in the end, he's going to say, I'm a thinking thing. I can have knowledge. I can exist without my body. God exists. Boom. That's his contribution to philosophy overall. And that's why a whole chapter is given to Descartes. And so, again, you can now walk through all this and say, look, meditation 1, what is he calling into doubt? Meditation 2, all the way through 6. But let me give you a few things that I just want to highlight here. So ultimately, he's going to say, the senses are deceived. I give you the example of a straw bending in light or in water, and it turns out it doesn't actually bend at all, but your visual fields are deceived because it looks like it's being bent, but it's not. We can be deceived in dreams. You can dream up a whole bunch of crap. Like I dream out I fly, right? I damn well know that I can't fly in reality. If I jump off my roof, I'm going to hit the ground pretty hard. But in a dream, I might be able to take off and fly into the sky, which, by the way, I have done. It is awesome. If you can't dream of flying, you better figure out how to do it. Get on the bandwagon, man, and start dreaming that you're flying like Superman, you know what I'm saying, or Superwoman. Get up there and start flying. It's awesome. Anyways, sidetracking you there. Then the evil demon hypothesis, that it's possible that an evil demon can deceive you about everything except for one thing, that you're actually thinking. And, you know, I want to just now walk you through a couple arguments for the existence of God that he gives you. And now I'm going to weigh in with logic. And again, you can take my logic class or any logic class or critical thinking class. Yeah, there we go. Cogito, I think, therefore I am, Latin. So that's his, main contribution. But I want to give you, and there's a bunch of distinctions that he'll give you, and some of you might read that and be like, whoa, purpose of this reading that you'll have to do is just to get through your quiz. But again, I'm trying to give you the big picture of what he's doing. Again, what was this like for review? Rationalism. Knowing things by reason alone. And that's what he's doing when he meditates. Now, he's not opening his eyes and walking out in nature and examining things and using the scientific method, even though he's a scientist, right? Literally, he invented geometry. What have you done lately? You might, that's like the joke, right? So he's definitely smart. But instead of using science and experiencing the world, he's actually going to say, I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to meditate. And just by reasoning alone, I'm going to arrive at certain conclusions about reality. That, ladies and gentlemen, is mind-boggling. How he can do this and come up with his metaphysical, epistemological, and logical contributions to philosophy. So that's just what he does. Now, you may not like what Descartes does. Fine. But I'm just saying that's what he does. And in your final paper for this class, by the way, you're going to have to pick two philosophers who you disagree with and two who you agree with. This might be the guy that you agree with or disagree with. You'll have to figure that out on your own. But let me give you one argument for the existence of God. Here's one. So these are three pieces of evidence or reasons, and then this is the conclusion. Premise one, he is certain that he exists as a thinking thing. He gives you this argument in the meditations, in the second meditation, the cogito. So that's either, it's a statement about reality that's either true or false. Two, he asks himself, what is it about this proposition that accounts for my certainty that is true? He answers the fact that I grasp it so clearly and distinctly that I perceive it could not possibly be false. Then he concludes, or, this is the main conclusion of the argument. Let this then be a general principle, a criterion. Whatever I grasp with clarity and distinctness must also be true. So you might say, well, it's a simple argument, but there's a conclusion, there's a bottom line to it. And it's called his criterion of distinctness and clarity. It's pretty fascinating. He's going to say you can't actually know an idea unless you know that the idea is not that idea, and it's something other than that idea. It's another idea. You're going to say that's when you know something distinctly, one thing from another, like green from blue, or colors from sight, or colors from sounds. If you know what a sound is, you'll know that it's not a color. That's when you perceive things distinctly, and then a color is a color, but because you have clarity, you can see different instances of color. So you can use this criterion for a lot of different things. It's really fascinating. But yeah, you can look at the contents of mind. This is when he starts getting into the philosophy of mind, like what's in my mind. I have ideas, and I have ideas that can move into action. Gets a lot deeper, but I just want to give you one of his arguments for the existence of God. Here's one. On page 383. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 7 premises, 1 conclusion, 8. So God exists. So, thus, therefore, as a consequence, all these trigger words can be just, conclusion indicators. Therefore, God exists, right? How does he get there? He gives you 7 reasons. You can look at these. If you can falsify one of those reasons, and this is just a little snapshot in logic, if you can say one of these are false, therefore the conclusion does not follow. That's how logic works, and that's how if you didn't like his argument that God existed, try to falsify one of those. Here's another one. Another argument, 1 through 8, right? 1 through 7. If you can falsify one of these, then the conclusion God exists would not follow. If you can't falsify any of these and they're all true, God exists. That's what Descartes' doing. He's trying to give you an argument. That's how arguments work. And why are arguments powerful? They're directed at your rational attitudes. Meaning, if this argument's true and you deny it, you're being irrational. That's how arguments work. If they're sound and they're valid and the premises are true, the conclusion follows. Anyways, this isn't a logic class, but I'm giving you a snapshot of how logic works. So you can look at a few different arguments for the existence of God that it gives you. There's one real short one too. Oh, right here. A 3-step argument. Premise 1 and 2. Conclusion. God, by definition, is a being of infinite perfection. True or false? 2. Existence is a perfection. That is, no being could be perfect that lacked it. True or false? If they're both true, the conclusion follows. So those are his arguments, and you might say those arguments have to work, because if they don't work, you can't get an instance of knowledge. Then you're stuck with the evil demon. Again, do your reading and you'll find out why. The only way to get past the evil demon and to figure out that things you perceive in reality are actually true is that God exists and God's not deceiving you himself. That's pretty much where Descartes' going with this. So he needs God to exist for his epistemology or his claims on knowledge to work. He needs God to exist. So if you can falsify his argument for the existence of God, you might be able to falsify his his foundation for knowledge that he's a thinking thing. And anyways, there's another argument. So this is an argument for the existence of the soul or the cogito. So I am a thinking thing. I can exist without my body. And he's going to give you 7 different reasons for this. And he's going to say, if all these are true, boom, that's true. So in review, you might say, in the Meditations, Descartes, he's giving us a firm foundation for knowledge. He's doing that. That's his contribution to philosophy. We ought to doubt our senses, Descartes says, because they sometimes deceive us, right? Don't they? I gave you the example of a straw and water. Some of us may have thought we saw a UFO ride in the sky until you go on a YouTube video and somebody else goes, oh, no. Some guy made that home video and he's deceiving you. You could think of 101, or 1,000 different ways we could be deceived with our normal senses. But for the most part, we're not really deceived. When we go out and we see the sun, it's really there. I see the house that I live in, it's really there. And you might say, outside of that, once in a while, our senses deceive us. And no matter how hard I try to doubt, I'm a thinking thing. That's the bottom line. I'm doing thinking, whether it's bad thinking or good thinking. And Descartes' claim and his argument is, I can't be deceived about that. I am a thinking thing. The result for his doubt and why he's doubting the way he does in the first meditation, doubt everything and see if I can arrive at an instance of knowledge. He's trying to give us a criteria for knowledge. Like, where's the starting point? Can I have a criteria? Can I have some sort of methodology for arriving at knowledge? That's what he's doing, right? And, the result of this doubting is that he says, look, inevitably, I'm a thinking thing. That's what I am. I'm not a physical thing, because physical things can't think. Like at my desk, my pen, my body, my brain. It doesn't do the thinking itself. I do the thinking, but I am a soul who's immaterial, capable of a rational nature, a thinking nature. That is what he's doing. He's going to say, so you're not your bodies, ladies and gentlemen. You're your souls that have your bodies. That's what substance dualism is. That's what his metaphysics is. Substance dualism is dualism. There's 2 substances. One's immaterial, a thinking thing, a soul. The other one's physical, a body. So he doesn't say, hey, you were made of 2 different things. One's a body, physical thing. The other one's immaterial. Put them both together, voila, you have two substances. So you might say substance dualism, that is his hallmark. That is what Descartes is very famous for. So there you go. So those are the thing that Descartes contributes to. Again, do your reading, and if you have any questions, you can let me know.